Yo, what is going on, everybody? Thank you so much for clicking on this video, coming back to the channel. Today we're going to be going over my top 30 wide receiver rankings heading into week 8 of fantasy football. I have already uploaded my running back rankings, so if you haven't seen those yet, make sure to go check them out. I'll be doing my top 15 quarterback and tight ends after this. So if you like the type of content, just make sure you subscribe to the channel. It'll be coming out all year. Also, if you like this video, if it helps out, drop a like on it. Also want to mention, no bye weeks this week, so everyone's going to be ranked here. There are a couple injuries, so one of the main ones is DK Metcalf. He didn't play last week. We don't know what his status is obviously yet for this week. I'm assuming that he's going to play, but I don't really know right now. So I do have him ranked here, but he's ranked lower than where he normally would be. Besides that, we're pretty much good. So let's get into these rankings. All right, first up, to nobody's surprise, it's going to be Tyreek Hill. Obviously, he's been unbelievable this year, one of the best players in fantasy, if not the best. They are playing the Patriots this week, so it is actually kind of easy matchup on paper, but they actually played him really well earlier this year, so there could be some of that, but overall, not really too worried about that. You're going to have Tyreek Hill and expect him to score almost 20 points every single week. After Tyreek Hill, I'm going to have AJ Brown ranked here next. He has been absolutely unbelievable so far. He's also had 125 receiving yards in the last 5 games, which is an NFL record. So just been unbelievable for fantasy and for real life. They're also playing the Washington Commanders this week, who have given up the 5th most points to wide receivers, and he's already torched them this year. So should be just another amazing game from AJ Brown. And then the other guy in this first tier of wide receivers I'm going to have is going to be Stephon Diggs. This offense really struggled this past week, but he still had a great week. That's happened a couple different times where this offense just has struggled, not looked good, and he still had a great week. So no matter what, I think Diggs is going to get his. It's just really about the rest of the offense figuring it out. And if they do, that's good for him, because more offense is just going to be more points for him. But regardless, Diggs is going to be a top 3, top 5 option every week. Moving on to tier 2, my wide receiver 4, I'm going to have Keenan Allen here to start it off. He definitely struggled a bit last week, but he should have a bounce back this week going up against the Chicago Bears, who have given up the 15th most points to wide receivers on the year. So I'm not really too worried about his bad performance. If anyone is, go trade for him. Same thing with this next guy. I'm going to have Cooper Kupp here. Not really worried about his bad performance. It's going to happen. He's still coming back from injury. It's just going to happen with wide receivers. It always does. They do have a tougher matchup this week against the Dallas Cowboys, but still, Cooper Kupp is somebody who's going to overcome every single matchup that he has. And also, they don't have Trayvon Diggs anymore, so he should be just fine. Should have a bounce back this week. After Kupp, I'm going to have Jamar Chase here. They're going up against the San Francisco 49ers, who obviously a great defense, but their secondary has not been good so far this year, especially the past couple of weeks specifically. Overall in the year, though, they have given up the 13th most points to wide receivers. We just saw what Jordan Addison did to them on Monday Night Football, so Jamar Chase should be just fine, should have a great day. And then the next guy in this tier I'm going to have is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's been also great so far for fantasy. He's gotten 12 receptions 2 weeks ago, 13 this past week. Just been absolutely fantastic to see. They're going up against the Las Vegas Raiders this next week, who obviously on paper, great matchup, but they've actually given up the 25th least points to fantasy wide receivers on the year, so a little bit harder a matchup. They are really bad against running backs, so that could definitely be a part of the reason why they're just going through the running game. But regardless, I'm not worried about Amon-Ra at all, so just plug him into your lineup. Kind of similar to this next guy, who's going to be Davante Adams, last guy in this tier. He has struggled the past couple of weeks. They really force-fed him this past week, and it worked out all right. He had a okay game, not great. He did drop a wide open touchdown, which is just not what Davante Adams does. So that's definitely uncharacteristic to see, but overall, I'm not really worried about it. Hopefully Jimmy Garoppolo, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be back this next week, and that should actually be very helpful for Davante Adams and this entire offense. Plus, they're going up against the Detroit Lions, who have given up the 11th most points to wide receivers on the year. So it's another good matchup and a place where I think Davante Adams is really going to want to bounce back. And also he should have his quarterback back. So I'm not too worried about him either. And then moving on to tier 3, I'm going to have CeeDee Lamb to start it off. He's coming off his bye week, and this week you're going up against the Los Angeles Rams, who have actually given up the 4th least points to wide receivers on the year. So definitely a tough matchup. But CeeDee Lamb, he kind of guy that plays in the slot a lot and just gets open. Coming off a bye week, I think they'll probably want to scheme him up. Not too worried about it, but definitely not in these upper tiers, just based on what we've seen from his consistency and this matchup. And then after Lamb, we're going to have Puka Nacua here. He went absolutely crazy this past week, and it is been kind of weird how we haven't been able to see Kupp and Puka both do good in the same week, but I don't really think that's an indicative or like a sticky thing. I think that they're both going to be just fine, and honestly probably both wide receiver ones the rest of the year. After Puka, I'm going to have Brandon Ayuk here. He struggled. I mean, not really struggled. He just wasn't used a lot this past week on Monday Night Football. But every time they threw to him, it looked great. They've lost these past 2 weeks. I mean, I'm a Niners fan, so it's a little personal for me and it hurts, but we've lost these past 2 weeks. And I really think that they're going to want to kind of scheme Ayuk open because obviously CMC is not 100% healthy and Ayuk has been really good when they've been using him. So they just need to utilize him more. And I think that will definitely help out a lot. And with no Deebo Samuel there, that should only continue. So I'm really hoping to see that this week, but definitely a little bit worried. And then after him, I'm going to have Adam Thielen here, who has been just unbelievable for fantasy so far this year. I know definitely one of the biggest surprises of the year. And they're also coming off a bye week. He's just been getting hyper targeted, and I don't really foresee that going anywhere. So I imagine that's going to continue. They are playing the Texans this week, which on paper sounds like an easy matchup, but they've actually given up the 5th least amount of points to wide receivers on the year. So there is some concern there, but I think Thielen's one of the guys where they're just using him in a way where they're going to hyper target him no matter what. So he should be just fine, but maybe not one of his ceiling games, even though I've kind of assumed that every week and he's completely blown my expectations out of the water. So I don't really know at this point, but it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And then the last guy in this tier I'm going to have is going to be Mike Evans, who's been just really, really good so far for fantasy this year. Another great week this past week, scored a touchdown. He's had 8 targets or more in every single game besides one of them, which is against the Saints. And historically, he just not good against the Saints. So not really too worried about that. And they are playing Buffalo this week, who kind of a middle of the road matchup for wide receivers, but they've definitely been struggling the past couple. So regardless of matchup, Evans should be a top 15 option every single week. Definitely going to want to have him in my lineup. And then after him, we're going to have Chris Olave, who he was just arrested on Monday, I think Monday, but he's already out of jail. It doesn't seem like it's going to be anything too serious, so I'm not really worried about that affecting fantasy whatsoever. The bigger concern is honestly this offense just not fully clicking, and hopefully it's going to come sometime soon. They are playing a pretty bad defense against the Indianapolis Colts this week, so I'm not really worried about the matchup this week. It should be a spot where hopefully they can try to figure it out. And after Olave, we're going to have Jalen Waddle up next, obviously also going against the New England Patriots like Tyreek Hill. Not a super tough matchup. He was having back spasms in the last game, so I guess we're going to have to monitor that. Normally it's not something that really lingers, so he should be fine, and he had been doing pretty good up until last week, so hopefully he can get back on track here. A lot of times the New England Patriots tend to try to shut down that first option, so could be a good game for Waddle if he plays. After Waddle, we're going to have Zay Flowers. He's going up against the Arizona Cardinals, who have given up the 4th most points to receivers on the year, so really good matchup for him. The Ravens really clicked last week against the Lions, and Zay Flowers is the obvious wide receiver 1 in this offense, so I think we can continue to play him with confidence, and in a good matchup should be a really great option this week. After Zay, we're going to have Devonta Smith here. He has been struggling as of late. A lot of that could be due to AJ Brown just being so dominant, but we know Devonta Smith. We know how good he is. We know how good this offense is. They also have a really good matchup this week going up against the Washington Commanders. So hopefully this is the week that Smith can get back on track. Regardless though, I'm just going to keep playing him, but definitely have lowered my expectations. Next up is going to be Christian Kirk. They're going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have given up the 2nd most points to receivers on the year. So a really good matchup for them. Obviously, Christian Kirk, I've made the change at least in fantasy rankings where Christian Kirk has got to be ahead of Calvin Ridley. The way that he's being used in the offense, the production on the field, everything just points that even though he might not be playing, the outside X wide receiver 1 role, he is definitely getting the most targets and getting the most valuable production in this offense. So until further notice, we just got to keep ranking Christian Kirk as a wide receiver 1 here. And it's a really good matchup. Obviously, there will be some down games with him and this offense, but in a really good matchup, I think we should feel pretty good about playing Kirk. And then the last guy in this tier, we're going to have DK Metcalf here. I kind of talked about it at the top of this video. He missed last week with an injury, so we don't really know, at least right now, if he'll be playing. If he is playing, and I guess it does depend on how healthy he actually is, he'll obviously be higher than this, but this is kind of factoring into the injury and if you want to risk it or not. But DK Metcalf, he's on the field, he's going to be in your lineup. To start off the next tier, we're going to have Nico Collins up first. They are playing the Carolina Panthers, who have actually been a pretty decent defense against a wide receiver, but we've seen some really big explosive games from Nico Collins this year, so I'm not really trying to go away from that, and I think that this is definitely a matchup, even though on paper it is kind of difficult. I'm not really too worried about it. I think that he should be just fine. Someone else who has been probably totally outproducing what everyone thought is going to be Jacoby Myers, who I have up next. He has honestly just really looked the part, looked like a really good wide receiver, definitely being across from Devontae Adams, and having that pressure taken off of him has helped out a ton. There's also a really consolidation of targets in this offense where basically the ball is going to Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Josh Jacobs, and a little bit of Michael Mayer now. And with Jimmy back, that's only going to increase the offense even more, and they're playing the Detroit Lions, who have given up the 11th most points to wide receivers on the year, so I'm feeling pretty confident about starting Jacoby this week. After Jacoby, I'm going to have Terry McLaurin up next. This offense has been struggling, but they're playing the Philadelphia Eagles this week, who have a great rush defense, but have a terrible secondary, at least in giving up fantasy points. They've given up the 3rd most to wide receivers on the year. And the Commanders always play the Eagles really, really tough, so I think this should be a good game, and Terry McLaurin is clear wide receiver 1 here, so he should be pretty solid, but there definitely is just a bit of a capped upside because this offense just hasn't been very good since the first couple weeks. After him, we're going to have DJ Moore here. They're going up against the Los Angeles Chargers, which have given up the most points to wide receivers on the year, so it's a great matchup for him. It doesn't sound like Justin Fields is going to be playing this week, so definitely that's a reason why I have DJ Moore lower in the rankings than where he normally would be. Tyson Bagent honestly looked decent. Like, he can get the ball to DJ Moore, so that's definitely helpful for the offense. And in a really plus matchup, I'm not too worried about playing DJ Moore, but similar to Terry McLaurin, just a little bit of capped upside, especially from what he normally has. After Moore, I'm going to have Garrett Wilson up next. They're coming off a bye week first off, and they have looked pretty solid the past couple of weeks. Zach Wilson just has been taking care of the ball, which is definitely nice. Breece Hall has been getting back into his workhorse self, and that has just improved the offense overall. And now they're playing the New York Giants, who are giving up the 12th most points to wide receivers on the year. So it should be a pretty good week for Garrett Wilson. Obviously, you can't totally always expect a ton with Zach Wilson as his quarterback, but Garrett Wilson is one of those talents where you can normally overcome stuff, and in a plus matchup, I think that he should have a good week. And then the last guy in this tier, somebody who went crazy last week and probably won and lost people a lot of weeks, is going to be Jordan Addison. He probably would be ranked higher, obviously, because Justin Jefferson's out, but they are playing the Green Bay Packers this week, who have a really good pass defense. Jair Alexander, I guess we got to see if he's actually playing this week or not. He'll probably be shadowing Jordan Addison, which could definitely give him some struggles, and they have much better secondary than the Niners, but we've seen Jordan Addison, what he can do already, so I'm putting in my lineup if I got him, but have him a little bit lower just because of the matchup. If Jair is out, I'll probably move him to the top of this tier. And then to start off my next tier, I'm going to have Chris Godwin first. Obviously, on the other side of Mike Evans, they're going up against the Buffalo Bills this week, so kind of a tough matchup, but not the hardest. He has been pretty, he's kind of been what I guess maybe a little bit underwhelming from what people expected. I thought he was going to get a little bit more target volume, but he still has good weeks and he's still valuable for fantasy, but he's obviously not the wide receiver 1 in this offense, not the red zone target. So his upside is definitely capped a bit, but still going to be a good option as like a wide receiver 3 probably. After Godwin, I'm going to have Courtland Sutton, who has been really good the past couple of weeks, even with this offense looking as bad as it has. He seems to be the clear wide receiver 1 here over Jerry Jeudy, and he's getting all the red zone targets and producing on them. So until further notice, I think we just got to keep playing Sutton, and it's definitely a risky option because his offense is not good and there's not a lot of clarity or consistency with his offense, but it seems like Courtland Sutton is one of the few bright spots. Javonte Williams also looked good, so that has helped their offense out, but they are playing the Kansas City Chiefs this week, who have been a really good defense, so there is a little bit of worry there, but with how good he's been, think you got to have him in. Up next, we're going to have Amari Cooper here. Obviously, it doesn't sound like Deshaun Watson will be playing this week, so it's going to be another week of PJ Walker, which is not good for Amari Cooper, even though it has been kind of good for the Browns. They are playing the Seattle Seahawks this week, though, who are giving up the 4th most points to wide receivers on the year, so this is a matchup where he should be able to be all right. PJ Walker is a solid backup, so I think that he can be fine, a decent flex option, but somebody who also just, you can kind of tell a lot of these guys, very capped upside with them, but they're still going to be producing for fantasy somewhat, so there's some floor with them, but I don't think that any of these guys really have a lot of upside. But I guess funny enough, the next guy is almost the exact opposite of this. I'm going to have Calvin Ridley up here. Obviously, he is a total boomer bust guy. He's probably either going to give you 20 plus points or could be like under 5 points. We saw this the past couple of weeks where he has not been good at all. Talked about it a little bit with Christian Kirk, where it seems like Kirk is the wide receiver 1 now, but Ridley is still super talented. He's still coming off not playing football for like 2 years, so there's a decent chance he's still trying to totally figure figure it out. And they do have a really plus matchup in the Pittsburgh Steelers this week, so I'm really hoping he can get back on track this week, but he is definitely a boomer bust option. And then my wide receiver 30, I'm going to have George Pickens here. He has been really good. They just need to give him more targets. I will say that Deontay Johnson has come back, so there is going to be some target competition there, but honestly, Deontay just helps offense out overall, and that is good for George Pickens because if the offense better, more scoring opportunities, and he's one of the guys in the red zone that they go to, and he can break long touchdowns at any time. So he's another guy that is going to be really, really good at times. Probably will have some bad weeks because his offense isn't very good, but hopefully they can get more consistency because they saw what he could do when Deontay is out. And there is one guy I want to mention too, who I guess not like in the top 30, but I definitely want to mention him because he could easily be above these guys, and it's Drake London, who has just been unbelievable for the past couple of weeks. And they also have a really good matchup against Tennessee, but there just definitely is some worry with Desmond Ridder in this offense. There has not been a ton of consistency, so I have been like a little reluctant to rely on their pass catching options just because of Arthur Smith and how they utilize them. But what we've seen for the past couple of weeks, they got to keep utilizing him, and they have a really, really good matchup in the Tennessee Titans. So I'm hoping that this is another week where they can just continue to utilize him like they have been. And since there's the wide receivers, there are guys who are also outside of these top like 31 who are also definitely in play. Guys like T. Higgins, Michael Pittman Jr., Marquise Brown, Tyler Lockett, all options who are definitely viable for your fantasy lineup. And if you have any more questions on them, just leave them down below in the comments and I'll get back to you. But here are my top 30, or I guess 31 wide receivers heading into this week 8. My top 15 quarterback and tight end video will be coming out next, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Subscribe to the channel. I'll have content like this coming out for the entire season, and I'll see you guys there. Later.